An American Werewolf in London is a 1981 film directed by John Landis, the same guy who brought us Animal House and the Blues Brothers. It's really just your typical werewolf movie, but Landis also adds his own brand of unique humor.
I realize I don't look so hot, David, but I thought you'd be glad to see me.
And it's got a certain visual style that's hard to ignore, adding another level to a pretty entertaining film. David and Jack are two Americans backpacking their way across the moors of London. They get attacked by a couple of werewolves, and while Jack dies, David awakens in a hospital and appears to be unscathed. He falls for the beautiful nurse Alex, but in her care he begins to have strange nightmares, and eventually he becomes a werewolf, against his will, and starts attacking people. The nightmare scenes are a little bizarre and feel completely separate from the rest of the film, which is understandable given that they're nightmares. Still, these scenes are completely out in left field and they're pretty grisly. There's a pretty funny scene where David wakes up from one of these nightmares and finds himself in the middle of a public park completely naked. The story switches gears when Jack's spirit visits David and tells him that the only way he can rest in the afterlife is if David sacrifices himself. This is also a pretty funny scene where all of David's victims show up as grisly corpses and suggest ways for him to kill himself.
How shall I do it?
Sleeping pills?
Not sure enough.
I could hang myself.
No, if you did it wrong, it could be painful. You'd choke to death.
So what? Let him choke.
Do you mind? The man's a friend of mine.
It goes without saying that Rick Baker's makeup effects are the real innovations here. The werewolf transformation sequence is the best I've ever seen, and the whole time the song Blue Moon is playing in the background. There's no scene in horror quite like it, and it's both awesome to watch and especially terrifying to witness. There aren't a lot of shots of the wolf in full motion, but when we finally get a glimpse of it, it's pretty chilling. It was also because of these effects that Michael Jackson hired Landis to direct the music video for Thriller. Because it really is just a werewolf movie, there's not much else I can say about it, aside from its entertainment value. It leaves quite an impression and is especially well done. The effects and the creepy atmosphere are what make it stand out, and the humor might even appeal to non-horror moviegoers. It gets a little bloody, but if you've already seen the Halloween or Friday the 13th films a bajillion times and you want to see something a little different, you can't go wrong with this one.
All right then. There was this aeroplane over the Atlantic on its way to New York. And it was full of men from the United Nations.
Go on, ask him.
You ask him.
So halfway over the ocean, the engines run low on petrol. So they have to lighten the plane. So they heave out all the baggage, but it's still too heavy. So they chuck out all the seats, but it's still too heavy. Finally, this froggy steps up, shouts, "Vive la France!" and leaps out. Then an Englishman, he steps up, shouts, "God save the Queen!" and he leaps out. But the plane is still too heavy. So the Yank delegate from Texas, he steps up, shouts, "Remember the Alamo!" and chucks out the Mexican.
Excuse me. Well, what's that star on the wall for?